A fatal crash on the city's north side leaves one pedestrian dead and another injured. Good evening and thank you for joining us. A person is dead after being struck by a vehicle late last night, and a second pedestrian is still in hospital with life-threatening injuries. It happened on Cumberland Street. Vasilios Bellows is following the story and joins us now in studio. Vasilios, what more do we know about this incident?
Ryan, we know that the collision happened at about 10:30 last night, and there was a significant police presence there until early this morning. The driver of the vehicle remained at the scene and fully cooperated with police, who are asking anyone with information to come forward. A tragic event on the city's north side. A serious collision late Monday night resulted in two pedestrians being struck, one who was later pronounced dead in hospital. The second individual is still receiving treatment for injuries considered to be life-threatening. A significant emergency presence remained on scene into the early morning. There was a number of someone's belongings, including a backpack and shoes, in the middle of the street. The driver of the vehicle remained at the scene and fully cooperated with police. The investigation is ongoing, with the traffic and major crimes units involved. Anyone with information or who has footage of the area at the time is asked to contact police. Vasilios Bellows, TBT News.
An abandoned home on Bethune Street caught fire early this morning, and not for the first time. Thunder Bay Fire Rescue responded to the partially boarded up home just after 8 a.m. Crews arrived with 6 pumpers, an aerial ladder, and a command vehicle. The firefighters extinguished the blaze and found the building empty. There were no injuries, and the fire marshal's office will not be investigating. The same home was also heavily damaged in a 2022 fire. That incident also resulted in no injuries. Well, the Sunday morning fire that destroyed a church in Casablanca Lake First Nation is being investigated as a possible arson case. A council member says the fire has left the community heartbroken. Jessica Clement has the story.
Community members in Casablanca First Nation are still in shock after a fire destroyed the community's only Anglican church. The blaze happened at around 7 Sunday morning, and it is now being investigated as a potential arson. Despite efforts from community firefighters, the church was deemed a total loss. Head counselor Rachel Mamakwa says the whole situation is heartbreaking.
The church was very important to us. All the records in that church burned. Those were the funeral records, baptism records, marriage, confirmation records, and also our memories. We baptized our children in that church, and there was supposed to be a wedding in that church on the 24th.
Mamakwa says the facility wasn't insured, as it was completely built by community members at no cost. They had also recently purchased new pews for the church. Mamakwa notes they haven't decided on what their next steps are just yet, but they do want to rebuild the church in the future.
I'm hoping it happens fast somehow.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hard. My friend is asking for donations so she can pick up gowns, fabric, candles, and everything. Most of the stuff that the church used. And I hope she gets some from the community at least.
A second blaze happened in the community around the same time, involving a trailer containing housing supplies. A 21-year-old from Casablanca was arrested and charged with arson for that incident. NAPS investigators are treating both fires as separate cases, but are investigating if they're connected. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
Thunder Bay's encampment distance guidelines are settled for now. After months of work on the file, the last outstanding question on the guidelines was resolved at last night's council meeting. Lee Noonan was at that meeting, and she joins us now live. Lee.
Thank you, Ryan. Council has decided to keep the encampment guidelines as is, but the issue of homelessness in the city is far from resolved. Councillors and city administration are committed to continually reviewing the guidelines and to advocating for long-term housing solutions.
Our assessment is that the observations and concerns from the community can be addressed with the guidelines as they are currently designed.
City Council ratified its encampment guidelines last month, but tasked administration with looking into a possible amendment, increasing the minimum distances from trails, sidewalks, parking lots, and bridges from 5 meters to 10. Most of council voted to accept admin's recommendations and leave the distances at 5 meters.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
Councillor Trevor Gertuga has previously argued against the city's human rights-based approach to homelessness. He initiated the referral back to admin, but says now he's comfortable accepting the guidelines for the time being.
I have assurances from the city manager that this is something that will be up for ongoing review, and it's something I can bring up again if we find that that it's becoming an issue. So it's trying to find a resolution for everyone that's going to be beneficial, but yeah, so I won't wait too long.
According to city administration, increasing the distances to 10 meters from walkways would have reduced the area that's compliant by a fair amount, pushing people out of the places they're in now.
People will move into more open green spaces, which tend to be in residential areas, or people will go into more wooded, bushy areas, and that's a concern for emergency services access. And in both of those scenarios, you're pushing folks away from the supports and services that they need.
Council also supported a motion put forward by Councillor Brian Hamilton, chair of the Thunder Bay DSAB, to endorse a number of policy papers advocating for more support on housing.
We need help from the provincial and federal governments. I mean, housing isn't a Thunder Bay issue, it's a provincial issue.
The DSAB policy papers address a number of issues, including funding for affordable and supportive housing, a lack of clarity on funding formulas and social assistance modernization, and long wait times for landlord-tenant board hearings. I'm Lee Noonan reporting live. Back to you in the studio.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lee. Sticking with City Council, it's been 2 months since the new parking regulations went into effect, and now the city is getting serious about enforcement. With a number of changes to parking in the city, increased fees, extended timeframes, and new areas for paid parking, written warnings have been issued to first-time offenders. But at last night's meeting, City Manager John Collin announced an end to that leniency.
The education phase is over at this point, if you will, and we do have to drive towards making parking a self-sufficient entity that we're not subsidizing anymore. So it's time to now issue violations with fines. The reality is establishing the parking within the city costs us monies, which means by extension, it costs the taxpayer money. What we're trying to do now is go more to a user pay system. That is to say, those who use the parking ought to pay for it.
Collin didn't have specific numbers on hand, but he did say there were quite a few warnings issued over the past couple of months. Thunder Bay Transit is investigating an incident involving a bus driver and an Indigenous passenger on August 5th. Neither the city nor the transit union are providing details about the incident, but City Manager John Collin did provide a statement saying, quote, "We are committed to fostering a welcoming, safe, and inclusive transit service for all employees, passengers, and the general public." Collin thanks those who came forward with concerns and says the matter is being thoroughly investigated. Public health officials in Ontario's capital are sounding the alarm about the rise in the number of Mpox cases there. They're now urging anyone who's eligible to get vaccinated. CTV's John Musselman has those details.
A sudden spike in Mpox infections, formerly known as monkeypox, has prompted Toronto public health officials to urge eligible residents to get vaccinated.
We know about almost 3/4 of the people who've acquired Mpox this year have not had 1 or 2 doses of vaccine. So we'd really like to remind people who are at risk to get either their first shot or their second shot if they've only had one so far.
Here is a look at the numbers. As of July 31st, there have been 93 cases in 2024. That compares to just 21 confirmed cases in the same period last year. While health officials note travel is not playing a significant role in these cases, Toronto Public Health says Mpox cases have been reported right across the city. However, a higher concentration of infections has been observed among residents in the downtown core.
With love, respect, no moralization, no value judgments whatsoever. But our outbreak in Ontario has predominantly been in the men who have sex with men community. In fact, over 96% of all of our cases in Ontario have been in men.
The virus first gripped Canadian headlines in 2022. It spreads from person to person through contact. Symptoms of Mpox usually start 6 to 13 days after exposure, but can take as long as 21 days to appear. They include fever, chills, muscle aches, and a rash.
It's 2 shots, 28 days apart. And for anyone who's been immunized back in the first outbreak in 2022, they're still protected. There's no need for a booster shot for those people.
Most people recover from the virus on their own within 2 to 4 weeks.
And that was CTV's John Musselman reporting. A new accessible form of hockey has made its way to Thunder Bay. Volt hockey uses electric carts to level the playing field between competitors, and it can be played year-round. Joel Mendelson reports.
Volt is an adaptation of hockey, which is accessible for participants who have limited mobility in either their upper or lower body. The carts are controlled with a single joystick, similar to the one found on an electric wheelchair.
For myself, it's hard to kind of, gauge the controls and stuff. People showing up here in their electric power wheelchairs are just like, this is what I do every day, and great at controlling it. It's been awesome to see people play sports that haven't had a chance to play sports in a really long time.
This was the second session that community members could come out and give the Volt carts a try, and the response has been quite positive.
I've done it I think it was a few weeks ago, and it was very fun. So the Volt chairs is when you get to sit and play around with the joystick, play with the balls, and it's something to keep you busy. I like when it's more accessible for more disability people and more affordable and more efficient for people like this.
The 2 trial sessions were held at Fort William Gardens. However, once the ice returns after the summer, the organizers will need to find a gym to play in. If anyone would like to get involved, more information can be found at the City of Thunder Bay's website.
The end goal would be a league. We have some people who already love it and would love to do this weekly. So if we get a space, we'll probably end up being voluntary hockey coaches.
Good news for anybody who wants to play Volt hockey. It's an amazing time, and all you need to play is one hand. Joel Mendelson, TBT News.
It looked like Joel had a lot of fun covering that story, and I'm sure a lot of people had fun playing Volt hockey there today. All right, let's turn our attention to the weather now, Haley, and maybe some people having fun out there in this heat. Some, though, may say it's a little too hot and choose to stay indoors.
Yeah, I have to say I wouldn't be expecting a hockey story on a day like today, so it's nice to see that they're able to play indoors. Because yes, it did get quite warm today. Some would even say hot. At a high of 30 degrees, which we hit at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But luckily, our humidex didn't affect us as much as we thought. 30 is 1 degree hotter than we thought we would get, but 33 humidex-wise is 1 degree cooler than we thought it would feel like. So luckily, things are kind of balancing out a little bit better than expected, and we've seen a mix of sun and cloud, but it was leaning more towards the sunny side. We were mainly sunny to partly cloudy throughout the day. And we started with a low of 12 at 7 in the morning with very light winds from the west, but then that shifted over. In the last hour, we've seen gusts up to 30 kilometers an hour. So we are getting a little bit of a breeze when it hits that hotter part of the day. So nice balance there. And things have been fairly balanced throughout the region today. We've seen a mix of sun and cloud throughout. Areas more to the northwest, like Red Lake, have been partly cloudy throughout majority of the day. They did have a humidex of 29, so not quite as hot as here in Thunder Bay, but they're at 27 right now, similar to that of Kenora and Sioux Lookout. Both places, they're also looking at a mainly partly cloudy day. Up in Pickle Lake, they have been experiencing some haze throughout the day as well, with more wildfires up in that area, and they're a little hotter at 28. Down in Fort Frances, though, partly cloudy at this hour. They've seen a mix of sun and cloud. 27 is definitely the trend for the west side of the region. But over in Armstrong, they have actually been experiencing a thunderstorm within the last hour. And a lot of areas in the region, including Upsala, Atikokan, over in cooler areas too, like Nipigon and Marathon, they all have a 30% chance of showers with a risk of thunderstorm leading into our evening hours, similar to that of Greenstone as well at 27, but they are sunny right now and they've seen a mix of sun and cloud today. Over a little bit more to the east, we see Wawa is the cooler area today. They're at 19, getting a little breeze off of the lake, and they've seen a mix of sun and cloud similar to that of Sault Ste. Marie, who's warmer at 25 and partly cloudy right now. As for Thunder Bay tonight, we are in that grouping that does have a 30% chance of showers earlier in the evening with a risk of thunderstorms. So we're looking about that risk to linger until around 9 o'clock this evening. After that, we'll go from partly cloudy to a few clouds, and eventually we'll hit a low of 12 degrees. So if we can get through these next few hours without a shower and a storm, then it should be pretty smooth sailing for the rest of the night.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. That 12-degree temperature, not too bad overnight. We can keep our windows open and cool the house down a little bit.
Exactly.
All right, thanks a lot, Haley. An emergency meeting was held in Ottawa today regarding that foiled terror plot in the city of Toronto. It was a father and son, and there are now questions about how they were able to come to Canada in the first place, because the father has ties to ISIS, reportedly. We'll have details on that and more when your Tuesday News Hour continues right after the break.
Parliament must do its work as well in pursuit of transparency to prioritize public safety